Ladies and gentlemen, I am really horrible at introductions, but this is another Player 2 review discussion. My name is Sarah Ellen, and while I continue to succeed purely by accident, I decided to push this failing forward to the test and lobby questions at Adam Rorke, a fine fellow gamer, and putting his hands in the air like he just don't care,
Oh, I
because it
care.
sounds like you just don't care that much about FixFox.
Uh, yeah, it's definitely more complex than that. Let's.
Yeah, and I the reason why we picked this one for a review discussion, because I think quite often I think we really go for more of the triple A ilk to do our review discussions,
Mhm.
because that definitely get the YouTube hits and get them to our website to read the reviews. And
Oh
I'm
yeah.
not gonna spoil too much of your review. I did read it. And I agree with everything in it, but for completely different reasons to what you actually said.
Which is
But for
exciting.
everybody who wants to go and have a read of Adam's review of FixFox, go to player2.net.au and have a look for it. It's going to be the most recent thing here if this is the most recent thing that you are watching on YouTube. Now, FixFox is a cute sci-fi exploration game by Prague-based developer,
Yep.
Renlike, and it's published by Joystick Ventures. It started out as kind of like a small demo title around some of the kind of game jam circuits, and it started as this little game called Spacer, and it's kind of morphed into FixFox.
Mhm.
Um, and it's a game.
It's a
That's
game.
about
Yeah.
the extent of what you can say
Yeah.
about
I
it.
think you did a pretty
And
good explanation from it at the start there.
yeah,
It's if you've ever played some of the older. Oh God, gone right into being old. If you ever played
yes,
some of
well,
the
that's
old
what we're here
adventure
for, being old.
games.
Yep.
Get off my lawn, kids. So some of the older games like Zack McCracken, Space Quest, those sorts of
Yeah.
adventure games. They'll text based, but at their heart, they're adventure games. It's this story told from start to finish, and you go around, you solve puzzles and stuff like that. I kind of feel like FixFox was very much in line with that. It's not like what you would call a modern adventure game. The modern ones tended to move towards like click here, click there, and the puzzles aren't very logical at all.
Mm.
These ones were definitely logical, and I can see the like how they initially called it Spacer because that's the organization that's FixFox, the main character, is working for,
Mm.
or is he? Uh, yeah, it makes sense. Like, so he goes out through the whole game saying like, "Oh, I'm a spacer," and this is in a future where humans and animals they're splicing DNA, and I thought like the intro was extremely cute.
It
Um,
was, yeah.
wasn't it cute? Because it said like, "Oh, sometimes they just did it to be cool," and I was like, "Ha."
And no,
Yeah, I can see
it's
people
for an
doing
actual
that.
purpose of
Yes.
keeping warm seemed to be the main premise of splicing with animals, is that
Hmm.
fur is that extra layer of coverage over skin that's going to keep you all nice and toasty at night in
Yeah.
a massive void of space. Um, it's Look, I in terms of the kind of, it does remind you of kind of a lot more of those kind of point and click kind of action games, and some of the controls on it are very interesting. In like you would expect with that kind of game, you could control the entire thing with your mouse if you really wanted to. It's interesting that
Yeah.
you kind of do a little bit more of the mousing and keyboard combo to it, but
Hmm.
going into kind of the tool bag or the toolbox to get things out, that extra little bit of, clicking with the mouse and having to kind of make the tool kind of go up off the thing to kind of signify it's
Yeah.
coming out of the toolbox was pretty it's a pretty interesting
I found the
control
same
choice.
thing. Yeah, like at the
Yeah.
start, I was like, I had to keep on reminding myself how those initial UI controls were working. And
Mm.
once you know, then it's easy. But it's like, I wonder why they went with that because like that's not intuitive and it's
Yeah,
not
I
normal.
was going to say, yeah, definitely not. It wasn't intuitive, and I took a long
Adjust.
time to get used to it.
Hmm.
Definitely.
I'm exactly the same. And the thing is, like, it wasn't really inhibiting any of the gameplay. It's more like you just have that moment at the start where you're like, oh yeah, oh how do I, oh yeah, it's this way. Drag it and bring it that way. Um, it's That's about the only thing I would say in terms of controls that I found like a little remotely off-putting.
Yeah.
And it's off-putting not not really into criticism to the point where I didn't even bother bringing that up in the review because I'm like, look, it's not really that important. It's just an interface.
It's adaptable. You can get
Exactly. And
used to it.
after what, like 1 hour, 2 hours, like it's very natural. You know exactly what you're doing. You're not even thinking about it because it's the same thing every time, right?
Mm.
Yes.
And I think that's where getting to the crux of your review. It is the same thing. It's the same thing every time. And
Yes.
yes, and I think, and that's
Ugh.
where um I definitely same thing every time. And I think the way that you went with that in terms of where you think this game was angled, I think that's
Mm.
where we differ.
And
So
that's exciting to discuss here because and we'll explain this for people listening, but essentially like every game will have what I like to call like a circular thing. So you've got your intro. Intro is always exciting because they assume like, hey, if you're going to decide to buy this game or not, let's make the first 15, 20, 30 minutes something very exciting. Everything feels new and it's very dynamic. It's like, oh, whoa, you can do this. Oh, look at the angle change. And oh, did you hear that sound when he did that move? That was amazing. So all this stuff is really new and exciting. And then it gets into the main game. The main game tends to have this circular motion of like, go here, solve a puzzle, kill enemies. Go here, solve a puzzle, kill enemies. And it'll do that right up until the end. And then the ending is like, okay, you've got this far. Let's like the stakes are high now, and like let's like really close this ending off. And FixFox does that. So it's not like they invented that as a game concept. It's been done many times. As I said in my review, that God of War does this.
mm,
God of War has exposition, then it has you're fighting enemies, and the other one is like you're solving puzzles.
mm,
Now, the difference between God of War and FixFox, besides like $500 million of budget money, is that God of War, like every one of those aspects, is fantastic and fun to play. And when you finish one, it's like you are looking forward to the next time you get to do that. So like the combat is really fun. So I like doing the combat. The boss battles are fun. I like doing that. And the puzzles are tricky and I like doing that. But it's not the same type of puzzle. And it's not the same type of combat. Like the enemies can change and sometimes you have new abilities and they have to play into that. With FixFox, it was very self-aware when you got towards the end. The AI personalities that follow you around even kind of make light of the facts, like, oh, we got to do this again. Oh, this should seem familiar. Like, ha ha ha, little inside joke. And I was like, okay, so you're aware that you've done this 3 times now. Now we're going to do it for a 4th time, and you're aware enough to put that in dialogue. Shouldn't you just maybe close off the game now, or do you think maybe your game's too short and this will extend it out by another hour and a half, which it did? Um,
yeah.
that's the question that I have. So, and I'm not going to say that's lazy developing and that's lazy game design. I've got no idea how they came up with that. Like, so it's disingenuous to absolutely say that. But, and this is where we might tend to differ, which is absolutely fine, by the way. I had this realization towards probably the last third of the game that its concepts, its controls, its puzzles, and everything else, it wasn't meant for me. I'm looking at this and like, geez, these puzzles are pretty easy. And it's like, okay, go here. It's like, oh, okay, I got to go there again to get the item and then come back. It's like, it didn't really make me think, how am I going to do this? I had to sit back and like, okay, so if I go there, if I hit that first and line that up and then I'll do this. None of that. And you can't die in the game.
Mm,
Um, and because it's also familiar, like I'm doing the same things over again, I was like, you know what? Like I was talking to my son, he's 10, and I thought he he would love this game. Like this would be very fun for him to play because it's not that challenging, but it's not just about the challenge either. It's about how fun the actual game can be and the story itself and the characters.
mm,
And the thing is, like the setting and everything is very cutesy and adorable. And I actually mean that. I think it's an adorable game.
mm.
How did you find it?
I think in terms of what you're saying of it being kind of accessible and the whole age appropriateness of it now, and the developers is very proactive on not wanting to have games that have a high level of violence and really to be having games that are promoting an element of kindness and friendship and wholesomeness to it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
The realm of the cozy game phenomenon that we are really experiencing. That's admirable. It's an admirable thing to be going for.
Yep.
um, the timing of when it's come out, I think, is where the disconnect is.
Mm-hmm.
So, because we are in the last few weeks, in an age of discomfort. We've had Elden Ring. We've had Strangers of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin, which is basically Neo skin Final Fantasy.
Yep.
Tiny Tina's Borderlands, which, has quite, quite complex concepts to them. And for that, I think what people are wanting as the antithesis of that is comfort. They want a game where the conflict and things and what you're achieving still feel like they matter, but the reward that they're getting from it is different. So when you're playing Elden Ring, it's the challenge of the conflict and with the enemies, with the bosses, and how far you can get. And oh my gosh, I've died again because I die all the time. The antithesis to that is something like, I hate to say it because it sounds so trivial, something like Animal Crossing, where the stakes are still high, but they're still high for very different reasons. Because you're playing a game where it's personally rewarding in a different way. It's not challenging. It's not challenging your skill. It's challenging your commitment in a way. And so that whole idea of the opposite of discomfort being comforting, I think what FixFox has done is it's tried to find that opposite being comfortable. And with that, there's no element of momentum, of being propelled to actually come back to it and to enjoy it in the same way. And I think that it's there are a lot of games that are going in that direction because we're 3 years. It's come out practically we're 2 years after the pandemic basically started in Australia and everything got locked down, and that was when Animal Crossing was in its flipping prime, and Stardew Valley and everything else where you're building, you were building friendships and you were building community, and things were really important. And I think FixFox was trying to do that, and it didn't. Because of the nature of the type of game they're trying to make, it didn't get there. And so you've got a comfortable game. Comfortable means accessible, and it means also age appropriate. It means that you're completely right. It is completely, appropriate for your kids, and the challenge of the puzzles also appropriate for your kids. But I don't think that's the reason why the developers did it that way. I don't think they did it because they wanted to market it to kids. I think they did it because they wanted something that was comfortable during a time where we are dealing with games that are pushing us to be uncomfortable.
I completely agree with you on that. I think you're bang on, and I should reiterate too. Like when I look at it and say this game's not for me, obviously I don't know the intention. Like if the developers came out and said, actually, Adam, yeah, you're right. That is who we're aiming this game at. Like, hey, first of all, yay, I'm right. But second of all, that's very admirable because you're shortening your audience. Whereas most games, every AAA game tries to hit everyone. That's what they want. They want everyone because they want as many copies sold as possible. That's just how they operate. Whereas I always find indie games are very happy with a niche, and they say if we can hit that niche, then that's great. So again, I don't know who they're aiming at. This is definitely my subjective take of playing the game. And to touch on what you're saying there about the things that maybe it didn't get right and why didn't it work, and why some other games work and comfortable games and all that sort of stuff. I think you're bang on. Like I definitely like games that have intrinsic reward where the game doesn't necessarily get harder or easier. I'm just getting better from playing it. I like fighting games. I like games that there's a skill ceiling. Far be it from how high that is, but there is a skill ceiling. It's like, if I feel I'm going there, it's like, oh, great. Like I feel better about the game. I feel better about my skills playing the game. And that makes me feel good. I can think of a bunch of games that I actually play for a lot of comfort. And, you can die, and sometimes it can be tricky, but I played it so many times, it's just relaxing to play.
Yeah.
So I can think of one game at the moment that I've been playing. I don't know if you guys have heard of it. Deep Rock Galactic. It came out a few years ago, and it's super adorable, and it's super fun. You play one of 4 roles as dwarves, and you mine asteroids, and you have mission objectives when you go in there. I put in like 120 hours on this thing. It's still fun, but every time I go in and I do a mission, I get something back. I get like resources. I can level up this, and I can buy this weaponry or this utility, and I can unlock that skin or something like that. There's something I can get back, and I think this is where FixFox really faltered, is that so many games that encourage you to maybe explore, maybe if it was an RPG, be like, hey, you want to go explore over there and fight some enemies? Go do that because you're going to get some loot and you're going to level up.
Mm,
Maybe you'll just get better at using your abilities. It didn't have any of that. So you
yeah.
can pick up a lot of items in the game. You've obviously played it, you know what I'm talking about, and you
Mm.
collect them. The inventory is a bit messy, but at the same time, like,
Literally and figuratively. Yeah.
yeah, it is. I'm
And I
like,
think it's supposed to be because of the
it
nature
is,
of
yeah,
yeah.
because like the main character is like kind of like, he's a bit of a mess, a bit of like, ah, shit, I leave a banana in the oven or something like that,
Yeah.
and so I actually like that that's how the inventory works because now I'm forcing for me to go, oh, I'll move this here and there and I'll move that over there so I can access it a little bit better. However, there's no real point in collecting all these items because you will have more than enough to get
Exactly.
through the entire
And
game.
that's where I found I struggled because I didn't know whether or not I should be going and trying to find every little nook and cranny
Mm.
where all these items were held because number one, you kind of get punished for it,
Yes, you
and the
do.
mechanic of resetting that is a little strange, and so it's kind of like,
Yeah.
do I feel like I need these things, or can I get enough from the oracle and the trader and the vending machine to kind of to hobble me through? And so I didn't feel motivated to do that. And that seems to be
Yes.
and because the risk reward wasn't
Mm.
there for that. The risk of, oh, the pirates are going to take all your stuff is like, well, I'm then not going to look for that much stuff until I
And
feel like I really need it. And then
yeah,
I'll
and you
and then when I
nailed it
really need
there,
it,
by the way.
sort it out in the most efficient way that I
Yeah.
can.
You nailed
Yeah.
it with the word motivation. I think that's the perfect word for it. It's like,
Mm,
what's my motivation? There's another word I use too many times in my reviews. I'm like, motivate me. Like, doesn't matter how good your game is. If I have to go from point A to point B, what is my motivation? Oh,
mm,
you got to go talk to a guy. Why am I talking to a guy? He's going to save the universe. Oh, okay. Well, shit, I better go talk to that guy. You know, if you don't have that motivation to go from here to here. Now, to be very fair to the game, there is a story and there is an
yeah.
objective, and we can actually talk about that. It's not really a spoiler. You're
Mm,
essentially you play as Vix. Vix is commonly known as FixFox. He works for Spacer. They fix things, strangely enough. So he's had this opportunity to go to a planet to fix a beacon. You get sent off. You land on the planet and you've crash landed. And so that starts this, okay, now we need to explore. We need to go find people, figure out what the hell's going on with this planet. Why is the beacon not working? And all of this to eventually get it working. And, you get to the ending and all that. No spoilers from me.
mm,
If you want to go play through it, there is an ending and it is a decent ending. It's not bad.
mm.
Would I say the ending was like, oh, wow, like the ending for Final Fantasy VII or the ending for like a myriad of other games where it's like that ending was something special. It wasn't anything special, but it wasn't bad either. Like
It tied up the loose ends
it tied it
essentially,
up.
which
Yeah, yeah, that's a good
it
way of
may
doing it.
did it make you feel like do you feel like you accomplished something by the end, or do you feel like it it was it was an ending that served the characters more so than it served you?
Yeah, definitely. That's a good way
Mm,
of explaining it. Yeah,
mm,
like, it's hard to talk about that without going into spoilers. So I'll try
okay.
and work my way around it. But the ending was like, oh, okay, yeah, that's not a bad ending, and that's kind of where it is. Did I get to the ending because I really wanted to see the ending? No, I was actually kind of over it by the time I got there. Now, that is purely a subjective take, so
Mm,
everyone else is going to have a different experience when they play games. That was just mine, where I felt like it was a little bit of a grind to get past those last 2.5 hours. I felt on the
mm,
game just because of that repetitive nature of things. Along the way, though, like the story does, it evolves, but it's very uh, it's revealing things without really revealing things. So it becomes about the characters in the game and learning more about them. So
mm,
you still have this overarching objective of like, oh, we've got to fix the beacon and we've got to get home and all this other stuff. And these other characters and finding out about them and their past and their relationships with each other. And that's kind of also important because when they do that, there's a lot of takeaways where it's not subtle. It's teaching you about like how to be, don't be prejudiced. And this person was prejudiced, but this is why they were prejudiced. And now that person realizes that, and now they're a good person and all that. And it's like, we should treat each other with kindness. And it's very it's not subtle in terms of like you don't have to really read into it too much. It's very obvious the messages that they're getting across. However, that's obvious to a 40-year-old who is playing the game. To someone who's like a lot younger, like that they would be playing through that, it's like that would probably make them feel good, like, oh, I feel sorry for him now, like, oh, that's why he was like that, that you will have those moments where you've watched so many movies and stuff and had so much visual and audio entertainment over the years. You've heard that story 1,000 times. It's like, they're in every kid's book, every TV show and stuff like that. Obviously for someone like me to really be engaged in that is like you have to get a lot more complex, better at writing characters. It's a slight criticism, but at the same time, it's not like I'm just saying, oh, it's crap. Who would play that? It's like, yes, lots of people play this and lots of people would enjoy it, and it is comfortable. Yeah. But beyond that, it's nothing was really surprising to me. In fact, the ending itself, like, it was the only thing that didn't feel like there was like a kiddie element to it. There's like, and if for anyone who plays it, you'll get to and you'll know what I'm talking about. But like right towards the end there, like things are happening. You're like, oh, that's a little okay. Okay, that's interesting. That's something to think about. So, and it wasn't a payoff that was like really eluding that much throughout the game. Like there were like sprinkles of it, but like nothing that was really ever explaining anything. So this thing happens at the end, and I'm being so crap right now. I'm telling you about the end, but I can't tell you.
It's like you can't tell.
I can't tell you. It's a secret
thing that happens, and it's like it's like, oh my god, it's gonna blow your mind. It's more that you want people to kind of you don't want to tarnish the emotion they're going to get from it, and that's completely understandable.
If any, and and like there was a thing at the end, and you're like, wow, that's actually really interesting. I wonder where they're going to take that, but that's not where it ends, and then where it really ends, you're like, oh, okay, like fair enough.
Is it more kind of like you were projecting where it could have gone, and that's maybe where I'm not saying that the ending's bad, not giving anything about the ending, but. Is it that your own mind was propelling this in a direction in order to kind of make up for, I guess, what you feel to be more, I wouldn't say simplistic, but I'd say kind of more general themes and tropes. The kind of go, oh, you could really do this spin here, and it would absolutely mess us all up.
Yes, and I was giving.
And then when it didn't happen, it's like, well, it's okay that it didn't happen, but you kind of wish that it did.
Oh, absolutely. That's exactly what was happening. But anytime you have like some themes throughout a game's story where it's like, oh, I wonder how they're going to explain that. I wonder how that's going to play into it. And when the payoff of that, after how it was about 9 to 10 hours, when the payoff of that is just like, oh, okay, it's just like it's fine. There was a payoff. Was it amazing? No, it wasn't amazing. Was it shit? No, it was not shit. It was all right. Like, yeah, I think my brain definitely was doing that throughout the game because it's hard not to. Whenever a game gives you elements that they don't explain but demand explanation, it's hard not to think about where they're going to go with it.
And I think it's also with the rest of it, like there were so many elements of it that were so that are so polished about it. Like it's it's like the music was
wasn't it good?
The music was the music worked well. The decision to kind of have like a top down view and also like make it kind of pixelated, but have those moments where you get to see Vix's face a little bit more intently, kind of like putting the visor on.
Yeah, as he puts the helmet on and off and stuff. Yeah,
and to at least kind of not make you feel like you were controlling a stick figure. Like there were some choices that were made that were just like that was spot on.
And they nailed those. All of those things they nailed.
Now the other thing, and I'm going to phrase it in a question. I'm going to see whether or not you go in the same direction I do because I'm just kind of
Okay.
curious. Okay, so we've talked. I guess we talked about comfortable, comforting, discomfort. So so basically this in a game that's been kind of comfortable, and you kind of talked about the bits that you know they kind of caused a little bit of I guess discomfort for you because they were not what you expected, or they um in your kind of comparably against other games that are more in your alley. It wasn't kind of
Hmm.
what you expected or really what you want to do. Did you find anything in it that was inherently wholesome and comforting, that you kind of went there and went, oh my gosh, this just makes me feel kind of warm in the heart and
Yes.
comfortable and like and that kind of comforting element to it? Was there any, can you think of anything? I can think of one
Yep.
thing, and I'm not, and I'm curious whether or not you're gonna get the same one. But I think, because I could think we've gone over this whole kind of, it's not mediocrity, but and
Hmm.
we've talked about the things that artistically and narratively have worked really well, but I guess emotionally, I think we both have felt very emotionally kind of very baseline with it, and that our
Hmm.
emotions are really picking up on the graphics and the music and those kind of things that we really
Yep.
appreciate in terms of its aesthetic. But was there a moment you just went, wow, that feels so nice, that just feels so comforting?
Yeah, the universe itself, its introduction,
Mm,
I never at any point felt like I wasn't believing what they were giving me. Now, let me explain that a bit better. Whenever
mm,
you play a game, see a movie, read a book, or anything, and it could be anything, if at any point something takes you out of that, where it's like, oh, okay, I'm not really sucked into this universe. I don't believe those characters. I don't believe the environment that they're in.
mm,
Whenever that happens, you're taken out of it, and it makes, for me, it makes it less enjoyable. And that could be any movie, anything, any game.
mm,
At
mm,
this point, like I mean, let's think about this. It's in the future. Humans and splicing themselves with animal DNA for a myriad of reasons, to keep warm and sometimes for health reasons.
mm,
And people work for companies, and there's relationships between this person and that person, and this was their past and that's their history. I believed it all, and I think the reason I believed it all is because how they set that up, and how the characters were written, and how they spoke to each other. I absolutely believed. And
mm,
there's a part, I think it's around about the middle, where you're learning more about the AIs that have come along with you.
mm,
And this was probably one of the more clever like lessons, where uh, the AIs are learning that they had this purpose that they were built for initially, but because of misuse or other reasons, like, oh, I was meant to do this thing, but because they were using me this way, that ended up being bad things, but they saw some use, so they made it so that I can just do this. And they
mm,
realized that that was a bad thing that they were doing, but it wasn't also really their fault. I thought that was actually really clever. That's not poorly written. That was very
mm,
well written.
mm,
And I kind of felt like, for the four AIs that you have, each of those moments for me was like, yeah, like, I mean, if there's a lesson that adults can take away from this, it's think. I mean, it's. I'm trying to explain this without spoilers, but um, think about the things that we're creating, and the purpose that they're doing. Is like, are you doing this so like you can have higher profits, like as a base level of high profits for your company? Yes, but who suffers for that, and
mm,
how do they suffer?
mm,
And I know that's very base level, like, oh, that's bad. But again, think like, we never did you ever have to read into this to find out, like, oh, there was a deeper meaning there. It's very obvious what all the meanings were. And
mm,
for the AIs, that was my major, I think, takeaway. But I liked, I'm trying to think of his name. One of the main guys in it, who is sort of like a friendly frenemy type thing with Vix, and that you go out throughout. You've already met him, I'm sure.
oh,
And yeah, the guy who was frozen.
that's
Yeah,
the guy.
the
Yep,
guy.
the guy. Yep.
I liked his arc. I thought that was a nice thing because like they didn't just explain it away in one little like mini cutscene or anything like that. They told it over a period of time, and throughout the game you can do these things called like dream state things, where you put a dream tape into this device, and then you go to sleep, and then you play out that dream that was on the tape. I thought that was very clever, and they did that to explain like, hey, I know this guy seems like a jerk, but you need to see this, and you see, you're like, oh, okay,
Mhm.
oh yeah. It's like just giving that extra layer, and I liked that. I liked that. I liked the AIs, and I liked the environment and universe that it created because it never faltered away, and I was never taken out of that.
Mm.
Hmm.
I basically for me, it is something a lot simpler than that. So now I'm gonna feel like a dumb butt. For me, I think the thing that I found the most comforting, but also I think the most tactile in a way,
Mhm.
was every time you had to sit down and have a meal.
Oh, how good was that? Yes, of course.
Dude!
Oh, wasn't that clever? That
Because
was.
it was a way of conveying information, but it was also they made
Hmm.
it was something that it felt wholesome because food is
Yeah.
comforting. Food is 245% is the most comfortable thing in the world when you get food. But it's for that it was like, but it was also the tactile way that they did it, and also how they kind of um they tried to make it an in joke, and it was not like an in joke, but they tried to make it contextually relevant to the story, but you know that they said it purely because you didn't want the actual game to crap out. The whole thing of you have to finish the entire meal. It's like, yes, because it's the only way that the game will actually work. But it made so much sense because it made you sit and pause and consider every single tactile action of picking up the spoon, picking up the fork, picking up the chopsticks, and like, no, did you feel like could have felt like eating it? You really could have, but also it it was like this massive kind of it took you it kind of took you a little bit out of the universe and the narrative for a moment, and it because it fixated you on
Hmm.
this one thing, and also was a really clever way of dispensing useful information to the player as if they were
Yeah.
talking to Vix. So I think for me that was the part that was most comforting because it felt so tactile, and it felt so kind of
Wholesome.
nice.
Felt
And
wholesome.
but I
Yeah.
mean with everything else, I mean it's just it's a comfortable game. Like
Yeah.
they did nothing wrong. It's a good short game to, it's like
Mhm.
it's about 10 hours or so. It's a good short game to get through. And yeah, the story ending doesn't have as much of a payoff as your AAA games and things like that. There's not the same level of plot twist to it, but the timing of its release for me is where it feels disjointed. And I think, whereas for you, it I think acknowledging that it's not a game for you is is a good thing. It's a nice it you know it's a good thing to
Yeah.
do, and being able to deconstruct it in the way you have is really important, because it's not you sitting there and justifying the way that you felt about it. It's just you sitting there and going, this is how I feel like this has been
Yep.
constructed, and that works well.
Yeah.
There's nothing that you can fault. It is a straight pass. It just
Hmm.
the payoff moments extrinsically and intrinsically are not there
Hmm.
as much. The dynamic of that is not there as much as what you'd really like.
Yep.
Yeah. Is it a game that on a Steam sale you would definitely want to pick up? Like,
Uh,
you'd say to some friends, "Hey, pick it up for something different to, to play over the weekend, either on your own or with your kids."
it would depend on the friend. I would have to,
Yeah.
because I like with most of my friends, I know what kind of games they like, and some of
Yeah.
them like completely different games to me.
Mm,
For example, my partner, there are some games I'm like, oh, you would love this game, but
mm,
I wouldn't. And that's kind of the reviewer in me coming out, because as much as it's impossible not to have a subjective take on a video game that you're literally reviewing. It's impossible.
Mm,
You can't do it.
mm,
Um, it is very important to sometimes take yourself out of the equation and realize, yeah, okay, they're doing this. You have to press X, and you hate the X button. Don't you know anyone that likes the X button? Oh, you know 10 people. Well, for them, that's great. Hey, here's a button, you press X. Oh, I love pressing X. Great, I'm going to go buy that game. It's so important to put that into a game. And I've done that with I've done that with games where I personally found them really hard to start off. And I know that there are people who can kind of like pick them up and keep running. For me, it's
mm.
any complex RPG. Like
Oh yeah.
I just like I get lost at the stat screens and stuff like that. It's like, can you just strength? Is that just
And
hit
it's
points? No, it's
decision
this and that. And you're
paralysis.
like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, all right. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just it's such a learning curve for me where people who often play that a lot, they go, oh, bang, 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 and I know what I'm doing. That they hit the ground running. I'm like, oh, for God's sake. The Battlefield games were like that for me as well. Lots of friends who have played them forever, they know exactly how they work and what they're meant to do. Whereas I'm looking at it going like, I don't get it, and I'm doing this wrong. And okay, so I spawn on that guy. Okay, now what? I go there. Okay, I got shot. What now? What? I can just respawn here. Sure. Like it was a
Mm,
learning curve, and when you can look at that and go, okay, but there's a large group of people that are really into that, for them, that's perfect. And I think your mention of Elden Ring is a great example of that, where these games are notoriously hard and they've never not tried to be hard. They were
mm,
always meant to be this like focus on combat and a difficult version of that.
mm.
It's been like that since Demon Souls, since its first incarnation,
Yeah.
its first version. Um, yeah, it's I like that they're popular enough to make a game like that and have it as popular as it is, because normally that's not the case. Normally it's a lot smaller, it's a lot more niche, and they sell enough copies that it's like we're healthy and we can make games like this for this crowd. The fact that they have this massive crowd is a big thing. As for FixFox, and to get right back to that, like someone like yourself, yeah, absolutely. Someone like my son, oh yeah, would love it. And
Mm,
someone who's just looking like, I mean, hell, if my parents are like, oh, they're actually after a game, like just like a feel good game, be like, go play this. This is a fun game. Like, I mean, you'll feel nice about playing it. It's a little story with nice characters in a universe that you didn't think of, probably couldn't. You'll enjoy it. You're not going to die, and it's not that difficult. So it's very accessible for anyone to play.
yeah.
The part that got me stuck is like, yeah, but for me, there's a lot less reward, but that's from
Yeah.
someone who's used to
Playing a lot of
intrinsically
games where you
rewarding.
get a lot more
Yeah,
reward out of it. Yeah.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
think
yeah,
I think, you're 100% right. It's the kind of game that I would, I wouldn't go to my friends that I play games with a lot and say, "Hey, you need to pick this up, or you need to pick it
yeah,
up when it's, $2 on Steam." It's more of a game that I would talk to a colleague at work and who knows that I play a lot of games, and be like, well, look, if you want to do something a little bit different over the
yeah.
weekend,
Turn
and
that
instead
brain
of
off.
instead of taking out the 1,000-piece puzzle, you got a computer. You got a computer, and you've this it's something that it's nice and it's comfortable, and it's not going to challenge you too much. It's going to, as we said, the controls to start off with are going to feel a bit awkward, but once you kind of get used to it, it's a lot it's a lot. It definitely is intuitive. It's not something you have to constantly have a manual next to you and go, oh my gosh, what button.
Mhm.
The signs on the screen and everything else are completely fine, but it's a game that you could sit and say, do something different
Yeah,
on the weekend instead of playing a puzzle. Just do here's a puzzle in a game. Just why not give it a go, and join the dark side. We have cookies, but this is how you start them on the road to Hades. Um,
hey, what a great game.
oh
Yeah.
gosh, I know. We need to stop plugging other games in here because this is not the point of this. But it's okay. So Adam, in summary of your review, do you believe
Mhm.
that right now, based on our discussion this fine evening, that anything in your anything in your review would change in terms of how you felt about it or how you justified it to yourself or anything like that? Do you feel like any of that have changed, or do you think that nah,
No.
you're nah?
I feel like from talking to you, those like that food part actually was that's something I felt like would have been nice to put in there, because that actually was like, yeah, that does kind of take you out a little bit, and the way that they works, it's another like series of puzzles and collections that unlock your
Mm,
ability to get the food, but then eating the food tells you the next part that you know you have to go do. But
mm,
how that works is it's very short and it's very simple, but it is nice and it is wholesome.
yeah.
And as comfortable as the game is, it's also adorable. And I could look at a game and say like, if I'm like got a bit of a smile, like, yeah, that's adorable. It's like, yeah, well done. You did something right there, right? Like your design wise, you did something right.
Yeah. And I think it's been interesting to have a conversation because I didn't get as drilled down on I got drilled down on more so on the input and the
Mm-hmm.
output, essentially, how you make the character move and all the aesthetics of it. But I didn't really sit there and think to myself, well, actually the reason I'm feeling this way is because of that loop, it's like a narrative loop, a gameplay loop that has just that didn't vary enough, and I didn't really think about it that way at the time. So
I think that's
this
fair.
has been a
Yeah.
good chat.
Yeah. Well, I talk forever, guys. I'm so sorry.
Oh no, it's all good. To sign off for this fine evening again, please go and read the review. The review's
Please.
fantastic.
Yeah. Thank
um
you.
yeah, no, you're very welcome. I loved it. And also, thanks for listening in and watching us kind of go in a whole bunch of different tangents on just a nice comfortable game,
Comfortable game.
folks.
Yeah.
Just
It's a
a
nice,
simple
comfortable
game.
game. And if you're a
Everybody
parent
else
with
is going to be
a
talking about Elden Ring probably next
9-year-old,
time, but we're just talking about a comfortable game.
they're going to be talking about that for the next 2 months, I guarantee you.
Next two
Then we'll be
years,
back to
Adam. Next
Fortnite or
two
something.
years, minimum. They're
Until
still doing gaming criticism on whatever Dark Souls they feel like that hasn't been talked about enough
they'll be
recently.
talking about it until Bloodborne 2 comes
Oh
out.
gosh.
Oh,
Oh, what?
no, I'm just kidding.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for tuning in, listening in, watching in. Go and read the review. It's going to be in the comments in the description below. My name's Sarah. This is my awesome friend Adam. Thanks again for tuning in, and we will catch you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.